Ladies and gentlemen, the idea of revenge is one that touches nearly every heart at some point in life. When wronged, our first instinct is often to strike back, to make the offender feel the pain they have inflicted upon us. But if we take a moment to reflect, we must ask ourselves, what does revenge truly accomplish? At its core, revenge seems like a simple remedy, an eye for an eye, so to speak. Yet the truth is far more complex. For while we may feel an initial sense of satisfaction, revenge only perpetuates the cycle of hurt. The wrongdoer is seldom changed by the act, and we, the wronged, are left with more bitterness and pain than before. The resentment grows, infecting our own hearts, and before long we are no longer focused on the offense, but on the desire to maintain this bitter grudge. Thus, revenge traps both parties in a never-ending spiral of negativity. In this light, it becomes clear that revenge is not simply harmful to the one it targets, it harms us too. We may think that seeking vengeance will restore our sense of justice, but instead it diminishes our peace of mind. The bitterness we carry eats away at us, eroding our spirit, and in the end we are often left feeling emptier than we did before the offense occurred. What then is the best course of action? The answer, it seems, lies not in the return of malice, but in the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness, though it may seem like a surrender, is in fact an act of immense strength. It is not about absolving the wrongdoer, but about freeing oneself from the chains of anger and hate. When we forgive, we refuse to allow the offense to govern our thoughts, to dictate our emotional state. We take back control of our peace, and in doing so we remove the power of the offense from our lives. But perhaps the greatest revenge lies not in forgiveness alone, but in loving those who have hurt us. Love, in its most profound sense, is the weapon that disarms hate. To love your enemies, as paradoxical as it may sound, is the most powerful thing you can do. It disrupts the cycle of retaliation, transforms the relationship, and ultimately neutralizes the power the wrongdoer holds over you. In this way, love is the ultimate form of resistance, not through anger, but through grace. This, then, is the key to overcoming the desire for revenge self-reflection. It is tempting, when someone wrongs us, to focus solely on their flaws. Yet if we turn our gaze inward, we recognize that we too are imperfect. We may not have wronged others in the same way, but we have our own faults and failings. The journey toward healing, therefore, begins with the acknowledgement of our shared human nature. In seeking revenge, we forget the importance of inner growth. We focus on external justice rather than internal peace. But real healing comes from within. The true revenge, if it must be called that, is found not in the harm we inflict on others, but in the way we heal ourselves, and through that healing bring a greater light to the world. Revenge is a natural, almost instinctual response to being hurt. When someone wrongs us, it feels only fair and just to retaliate in some way, to make them feel the consequences of their actions. This drive to avenge ourselves is rooted deeply in human nature, and it spans across cultures, histories, and personal experiences. It taps into a sense of justice that resides in the heart of every person, a yearning for balance in the face of what seems like an unequal, unjust action. But while this impulse is universal, the deeper question must be asked: what is revenge really? At first glance, revenge seems like a simple solution to the problem of being wronged. We feel slighted, and to restore our own dignity and sense of fairness, we believe that getting even will alleviate the hurt. The logic behind revenge seems straightforward. If someone does something harmful to us, then it only follows that we should cause them equivalent harm in return. This idea of getting back at someone is deeply ingrained in human psychology. It is the mental equation of wrongs balanced by retaliatory actions. But what does this really achieve? In the immediate aftermath of being wronged, seeking revenge may bring a sense of satisfaction. It might feel like justice is being served, yet this feeling is often fleeting. The satisfaction that comes from retaliation is rarely lasting, and soon the harm that was caused to us is compounded by the damage we do to others and ultimately to ourselves. What revenge does, in essence, is perpetuate the original injury. It locks both the wrongdoer and the wronged in a vicious cycle, each person inflicting pain on the other, without resolution. This cycle does not heal the wound, it deepens it. The truth is that revenge, rather than restoring balance or righting the wrongs, often ends up creating more pain for everyone involved. The desire to make someone feel the hurt they caused us blinds us to the possibility that there may be a higher, more constructive way to address the injustice. Instead of offering closure, revenge prolongs the emotional turmoil as it keeps us focused on the past injury. Our thoughts become consumed with the need to retaliate, often at the expense of our emotional well-being. What's worse, it feeds the same cycle of animosity that keeps us stuck in the same state of mind. The person who has wronged us may not even be affected by the revenge we take. In fact, they may never realize the pain they have caused. Meanwhile, we, the wronged party, bear the emotional cost of our anger, resentment, and desire for vengeance. The act of revenge, when we truly examine it, is not the resolution we imagine it to be. Instead of providing peace or restoring dignity, revenge traps us in an ongoing conflict. It may give a temporary illusion of power or control, but it also reinforces a state of hostility. This emotional state is not only unhealthy, but it also obstructs personal growth and healing. The more energy we direct toward vengeance, the less energy we have to focus on overcoming the harm done to us. It leaves us tethered to the past, forever looking backward instead of moving forward with our lives. Revenge often distracts us from more effective and productive ways of dealing with pain. It shifts the focus from understanding the deeper implications of what happened to a shallow pursuit of immediate satisfaction. Revenge does not allow for reflection or understanding. Instead, it feeds the emotional responses of anger, bitterness, and hate, which may seem justified but do nothing to promote true healing. The idea that revenge will bring us relief is one rooted in the mistaken belief that external actions can heal our inner wounds. But it is only by addressing the wound within ourselves that we can truly heal, and revenge does nothing to foster this internal growth. While it's true that some wrongdoers are fully aware of their actions and the harm they've caused, others may be oblivious or even regretful. By seeking revenge, we assume that the person who hurt us is deserving of further harm. Yet this ignores the possibility that they, too, may need forgiveness or understanding. Retaliation, in this sense, is a blanket judgment, failing to take into account the individual complexities of the situation. As we focus on punishing them, we ignore the possibility of a more compassionate and understanding response that might lead to healing for both parties. This brings us back to the fundamental question: what does revenge truly achieve? It satisfies an immediate emotional impulse, but it does not lead to long-term peace or resolution. It leaves both parties scarred and the situation unresolved. In fact, it often obscures the possibility of reconciliation, personal growth, and true emotional healing. If we want to find real peace and break free from the cycle of hurt, we must look beyond revenge and towards something more constructive, something that involves self-reflection, forgiveness, and a willingness to let go of the past. Revenge, far from offering the closure or justice that one might expect, often serves only to perpetuate the very harm it seeks to remedy. This is a central paradox of vengeance. While it appears to be a way to restore balance or fairness after being wronged, in reality, it more often entangles both the wrongdoer and the wronged in an endless cycle of pain and retaliation. When we seek revenge, we are not simply addressing the initial injury, but rather compounding it, creating further emotional and psychological wounds that deepen over time. The pursuit of revenge transforms a single injury into a prolonged, unresolved conflict that prevents healing and growth for all involved. When we retaliate against someone who has hurt us, we often do so with the hope of feeling vindicated, as though striking back will restore our dignity or sense of justice. However, this reaction overlooks the deeper consequences of such actions. Initially, we might feel a brief surge of satisfaction, as though we have righted the wrong done to us. But this feeling is typically short-lived. Once the initial satisfaction fades, the cycle of resentment and hurt continues. The individual we've wronged may never even acknowledge the pain they've caused, and thus any sense of justice we hope to achieve becomes hollow. In fact, revenge can sometimes backfire by escalating the conflict. If the person we retaliate against responds in kind, the situation may escalate further, leading to a bitter and drawn-out feud. Instead of ending the conflict, revenge can multiply the emotional toll, making it harder to move forward. This cycle of hurt is damaging because it traps both parties in the past. The desire for revenge keeps us focused on what was done to us, preventing us from moving beyond the hurt and finding peace. The wrongdoer may not even be affected by our actions, but we, the ones seeking vengeance, become consumed by the need to get back at them. This fixation on retaliation eats away at our own mental and emotional well-being, as it keeps us tethered to the original injury. Our thoughts become preoccupied with the wrong, and we are left unable to focus on healing or resolving the emotional turmoil within ourselves. Revenge, in this sense, can be seen as a self-destructive force that not only damages the relationship between the wrongdoer and the wronged, but also harms the one who seeks vengeance by fueling negative emotions and thoughts. Revenge fails to address the root causes of the pain we feel. When we are wronged, the hurt we experience often stems from a deeper emotional wound, whether it's a sense of betrayal, humiliation, or loss. Seeking revenge does nothing to heal this emotional wound. Instead, it merely reinforces the pain. It prevents us from understanding the reasons behind the hurt and from confronting our own emotional responses to it. Instead of addressing the emotional complexities of the situation, revenge simplifies the matter into a transactional equation. You hurt me, so I will hurt you, but emotions, especially the ones involved in conflict, are rarely so simple. In focusing on retribution, we avoid dealing with the deeper emotional work that is necessary for healing and personal growth. The focus on revenge also prevents us from considering the possibility of forgiveness, which is often the only true way to break the cycle of hurt. Forgiveness does not mean condoning or excusing the wrong that was done to us. Rather, it is an act of personal liberation. When we forgive, we free ourselves from the grip of anger and resentment that revenge perpetuates. The decision to forgive allows us to move on, to stop reliving the hurt, and to begin the healing process. Revenge, on the other hand, keeps us locked in a state of emotional paralysis, where the past injury continuously defines our present reality. By choosing to retaliate, we allow the offense to continue influencing our actions and emotions, prolonging our suffering. As the cycle of harm continues, so too does the bitterness that results from it. Bitterness is a poison that spreads within us, affecting our relationships, our sense of self-worth, and even our mental and physical health. The more we cling to the desire for revenge, the more bitterness takes root. This bitterness can overshadow our ability to experience joy, peace and fulfillment, as our minds remain entrenched in thoughts of retaliation. Over time, this bitterness becomes a defining characteristic of our interactions, not just with the person who wronged us, but with others as well. It seeps into our worldview, leading us to view others with suspicion, hostility, and distrust, even when no offense has occurred. The belief that revenge will bring closure also ignores the complexity of human relationships. People are not one-dimensional, and their actions are often influenced by factors that we may not fully understand. The person who hurt us may have acted out of ignorance, insecurity, or a misunderstanding. They may not even be fully aware of the pain they caused. In such cases, seeking revenge may not only be unfair but also counterproductive, as it prevents us from gaining insight into the situation and offering compassion or empathy where it is needed. It denies the possibility of healing through understanding and connection, choosing instead to perpetuate conflict. Every act of retaliation keeps us focused on the wrong, and instead of growing beyond it, we become stuck in the past, our hearts and minds frozen in time. Revenge stifles our emotional development and prevents us from evolving into more compassionate, understanding, and peaceful individuals. The true path to healing lies not in seeking retribution, but in breaking the cycle of pain. Only by choosing to let go of the need for vengeance can we find the freedom to move forward, grow, and ultimately heal from the wounds that have been inflicted upon us. Seeking revenge is not only harmful to the person we target, but it is also deeply damaging to ourselves. This may seem counterintuitive at first, as we often think of revenge as a way to restore justice or right a wrong. However, when we harbor the desire for revenge, we unknowingly subject ourselves to emotional, psychological, and even physical harm. This is because revenge, while seemingly a way to assert control or gain satisfaction, ultimately serves to trap the one seeking vengeance in a cycle of negativity that impedes personal well-being and growth. The desire for revenge is rooted in a strong emotional reaction to the harm or injustice we have experienced. When we are wronged, particularly in a deeply personal way, there is often a desire to restore balance by making the wrongdoer feel the pain they caused us. However, this desire is an emotional impulse that clouds our judgment and creates a tunnel vision, preventing us from seeing the bigger picture. Instead of focusing on healing from the injury, we become fixated on the idea of retaliation, believing that this is the only way to reclaim our sense of justice and control. The problem is that this fixation consumes our mental and emotional energy, preventing us from moving forward in a healthy manner. When we seek revenge, we give power to the very person who has hurt us. The act of focusing our thoughts and actions on the wrongdoer means that they continue to hold influence over us. Instead of letting go of the harm they caused and reclaiming our peace of mind, we allow them to dictate our emotional state. We become slaves to the resentment and anger that our desire for revenge fosters, and this toxic emotion begins to control us. The more we dwell on revenge, the more power the wrongdoer has over our thoughts and feelings, and in turn, the more damage we inflict upon ourselves. Our happiness and inner peace are dictated by someone else's actions, and in this way we are robbed of our own emotional autonomy. Seeking revenge also prevents us from confronting the emotional pain that we have experienced. When we focus all of our energy on retaliating, we are, in effect, avoiding the real source of our suffering. The emotional wound that was caused by the initial wrong is not addressed instead. It is compounded by anger, resentment, and the drive to cause harm. This avoidance of the root cause of our pain prevents healing, as we are not allowing ourselves the time and space to process our emotions. Instead of seeking ways to understand, forgive, or let go, we fixate on an external solution, revenge, that does nothing to alleviate the inner turmoil we feel. On a deeper level, the emotional burden of harboring resentment and anger can also have long-term psychological consequences. Holding on to feelings of hurt and the desire for revenge can create an internal state of chronic stress, which has been shown to have detrimental effects on both mental and physical health. The ongoing emotional turmoil of seeking revenge, or even simply thinking about it, can raise cortisol levels and keep the body in a state of fight or flight. This constant state of tension can lead to anxiety, depression, insomnia, and a weakened immune system, among other health issues. Essentially, the act of holding on to vengeance is not only an emotional strain, but it also wears down the body, leading to greater physical health risks. Beyond the emotional and physical toll, seeking revenge can also erode one's sense of self-worth and personal integrity. When we retaliate against someone who has wronged us, we lower ourselves to their level by choosing to act out of anger or bitterness. Instead of rising above the situation and responding with dignity, we allow ourselves to become entangled in the same negativity that caused us harm in the first place. This diminishes our own sense of moral clarity and self-respect. We may even begin to question our own values, wondering whether retaliation was truly justified. The longer we cling to the desire for revenge, the more we lose sight of who we truly are, as our actions become driven by bitterness and the need to seek justice rather than by our higher principles. Each time we act out of vengeance, we reinforce a pattern of reactivity that keeps us trapped in the past. Instead of learning from our experiences and using them as opportunities for personal development, we continue to replay the cycle of hurt and retaliation. This prevents us from moving forward in a positive direction. Personal growth requires the ability to reflect on our experiences, to learn from our pain, and to transform it into wisdom. Revenge, on the other hand, keeps us stuck in the same emotional and psychological state, preventing us from evolving into more compassionate and understanding individuals. The desire for revenge also blinds us to the possibility of forgiveness, which is one of the most powerful tools for personal healing. Forgiveness does not mean excusing the wrongs committed against us, but it does mean releasing ourselves from the emotional and psychological burden of hatred and resentment. It is an act of self-liberation that allows us to take back control of our emotions and our lives. By forgiving, we free ourselves from the toxic grip of anger and hatred, and we allow ourselves to move forward with peace and clarity. When we choose revenge, we close off the possibility of forgiveness and, with it, the opportunity for true healing. Instead, we remain trapped in a cycle of negative emotions that prevent us from experiencing the freedom and peace that forgiveness can bring. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness or submission, especially when we have been deeply hurt. The misconception arises because forgiveness is frequently viewed as letting the wrongdoer off the hook, as if we are excusing their behavior or absolving them of responsibility. However, forgiveness is not about excusing the offense, it is about freeing ourselves from the hold that anger, resentment, and bitterness have over us. Far from being a weak response, forgiveness is, in fact, an act of profound strength and personal empowerment. It is an intentional choice to rise above the desire for revenge and to reclaim control over our emotional and psychological well-being. The act of forgiveness begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. When we are wronged, our instinct is to hold on to the hurt, to allow the offense to define our emotions and reactions. The longer we hold on to the injury, the more it consumes us, shaping our thoughts and behaviors. By choosing to forgive, we are deciding to release that hold. We are saying that we will no longer allow the offense to control our thoughts or dictate our emotional state. Forgiveness, therefore, is not about denying the pain or pretending that the offense did not occur. It is about choosing to let go of the power the wrongdoing has over us. It is an active choice to stop letting the wrong define who we are and how we feel. Forgiveness is also about reclaiming our peace. When we carry resentment, we are not only emotionally burdened but also mentally weighed down. Resentment takes up space in our minds and hearts, preventing us from moving forward in life with clarity and freedom. The person who wronged us continues to occupy our thoughts, often without us realizing how much mental energy we are expending on them. The act of forgiveness breaks this cycle. It allows us to stop reliving the offense in our minds, to stop giving mental real estate to someone who has already hurt us. In this sense, forgiveness is an act of self-liberation. It is a way to free ourselves from the emotional prison that resentment has created, so that we can live our lives more fully and peacefully. It is also important to recognize that forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. While forgiveness allows us to release the negative emotions tied to the offense, it does not require us to trust the wrongdoer or to continue a relationship with them, especially if they have shown no remorse or changed behavior. Forgiving someone does not mean that we condone their actions or that we forget the harm they caused. Rather, forgiveness means that we choose not to be ruled by anger or bitterness. It is an internal process that allows us to let go of the emotional weight of the hurt without needing anything from the other person in return. In some cases, reconciliation may not even be possible or advisable, but forgiveness still allows us to move forward without being encumbered by past wrongs. Forgiveness is also an act of emotional healing. When we refuse to forgive, we continue to carry the emotional burden of the hurt, which can lead to long-term psychological and even physical consequences. Unforgiveness often leads to chronic stress, anxiety, depression, and a range of other emotional and mental health issues. Holding on to anger and resentment increases our levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, which can weaken the immune system, disrupt sleep, and contribute to a variety of health problems. In this sense, forgiveness is a form of emotional self-care. It is a way to heal the wounds within us, to release the negative emotions that hinder our personal well-being, and to restore balance in our emotional lives. The power of forgiveness extends beyond the individual to the broader relationships and communities in which we live. When we choose to forgive, we break the cycle of hostility and anger that often perpetuates conflict. In doing so, we create space for understanding, empathy, and healing. Forgiveness has the power to transform relationships. It can mend fractured bonds, create new possibilities for connection, and foster a sense of peace and reconciliation. When we forgive, we open the door to a more compassionate and understanding world, one where people are not defined by their mistakes, but by their capacity for growth and change. Through forgiveness, we not only heal ourselves, but also contribute to the healing of the broader community. It forces us to confront our own emotions, our own vulnerabilities, and our own need for control. Forgiveness is not always easy. It requires us to dig deep and to let go of the desire to punish or seek revenge. In this way, forgiveness is a process of personal growth. It challenges us to cultivate compassion, empathy, and emotional resilience. By forgiving others, we develop the strength to overcome our own emotional challenges and to rise above the circumstances that caused us pain. We learn that we are not defined by the wrongs others have done to us, but by our ability to move forward with grace and strength. When we forgive, we are not only releasing our own pain, but we are also preventing it from being passed on to others. Often when we are hurt, we become carriers of that pain, lashing out at those around us or spreading negativity. This creates a ripple effect, where the harm we experience is perpetuated and passed on to others. Forgiveness allows us to break that cycle, to stop the transmission of hurt, and to choose a different path, one of healing, understanding, and peace. By forgiving, we take responsibility for our emotional state, and stop the cycle of hurt from continuing. It requires self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and the ability to see beyond our immediate feelings of hurt or anger. It calls for the strength to acknowledge the pain we have experienced while also choosing not to let it control us. Forgiveness is not a passive response, it is an active, courageous decision to heal, to move forward, and to choose peace over conflict. It is a decision to release ourselves from the grip of negative emotions and to reclaim our inner peace. In this way, forgiveness is an expression of emotional maturity, a sign of personal strength, and a powerful force for transformation. The pursuit of revenge is often driven by a desire for justice, to right a perceived wrong. However, the very notion of justice in the context of revenge is deeply flawed. Justice, in its truest form, seeks to restore balance, ensure fairness, and promote healing, not perpetuate harm or escalate conflict. Revenge, on the other hand, is an emotional response based on a desire to retaliate, which instead of restoring balance, perpetuates a cycle of suffering and intensifies the original harm. The idea that revenge leads to justice is an illusion, one that can lead to greater conflict and destruction, rather than the resolution or closure we expect. When we seek revenge, we often believe that the act of retaliation will somehow level the playing field. We might think that by causing the person who wronged us to suffer, we will achieve a sense of justice or fairness, that their wrongdoings will be paid back. Yet this belief is rooted in a simplistic and transactional view of justice. True justice, however, is not about retribution or balance through suffering. It is about understanding, restoring peace, and addressing the underlying issues that led to the harm in the first place. Revenge, by focusing solely on retaliation, ignores the complexities of justice. Instead of bringing resolution, it fuels further division and hostility. What we perceive as justice in revenge is merely an extension of the pain that we are trying to escape. When we respond to an injustice with an equal or greater act of harm, we escalate the situation. This escalation leads to a vicious cycle where both parties become more entrenched in their positions, and the possibility of reconciliation or understanding becomes increasingly unlikely. The person we seek to get back at may retaliate in turn, leading to a continuous back and forth that only deepens the animosity. In such cases, justice is not served because the core issues remain unaddressed, and the cycle of harm continues without resolution. Rather than righting a wrong, revenge simply adds fuel to the fire of conflict, making it harder to move past the hurt. People may hurt us unintentionally, or they may act out of ignorance, fear, or misunderstanding. Seeking revenge assumes that the other person is fully responsible for the harm they caused, and that they are deserving of punishment. Yet this fails to account for the broader context in which the wrongdoing occurred. In many cases, revenge ignores the possibility of forgiveness, empathy, or understanding. It refuses to acknowledge that people are fallible, and that harm may result from factors beyond malice or intent. By focusing on retribution, revenge oversimplifies the situation and misses the opportunity for genuine resolution. True justice would involve understanding the reasons behind the wrong and considering how both parties can move forward with mutual understanding and respect. Revenge also creates a false sense of empowerment. We often believe that by retaliating we are regaining control over our situation or showing that we will not tolerate mistreatment. However, in reality, revenge only further entangles us in the emotional drama created by the original wrongdoing. The act of seeking revenge can make us feel momentarily powerful, but this power is illusory. The desire for retaliation keeps us focused on the wrong and prevents us from letting go of the pain it caused. Instead of being empowered by forgiveness, which allows us to move forward with peace and clarity, revenge keeps us bound to the past, holding on to anger and resentment. The more we focus on retaliation, the more we diminish our own ability to heal and grow. The act of retaliation can have far-reaching effects that we might not anticipate, especially if we become consumed by the desire for revenge. Our actions, driven by anger or hatred, can cause collateral damage to other relationships or situations that we value. In some cases, seeking revenge might escalate into more serious conflicts or even legal repercussions. What we may have initially thought was a justified response can spiral out of control, leaving us with regret and further emotional distress. Rather than bringing justice, revenge often leads to more problems and complications that were never anticipated, leaving both the wrongdoer and the wronged in a worse position than before. When we are wronged, we are faced with a choice. We can choose to respond in a way that promotes healing, either through understanding, forgiveness, or simply letting go of the past, or we can choose to perpetuate the cycle of harm. Revenge keeps us stuck in the past, unable to move forward. It focuses on external actions punishing the wrongdoer rather than addressing the internal process of healing. By pursuing vengeance, we close off the possibility of personal growth. We become fixated on the wrong, unable to learn from the experience and transform it into wisdom. On the other hand, choosing not to seek revenge allows us to process our emotions, learn from the experience, and grow as individuals. True justice, in this sense, lies in our ability to rise above the pain and not let it define us. True justice is restorative, not retributive. Instead of seeking to get back at someone, true justice seeks to heal the harm done and restore balance. It looks for ways to address the underlying causes of the wrongdoing, promote understanding between the parties involved, and create opportunities for reconciliation. This is the kind of justice that allows both individuals to grow and move forward in a positive direction. Revenge, by focusing on retaliation, ignores this process of restoration and instead deepens the divide between people, ensuring that no healing takes place. While it may provide temporary satisfaction, revenge ultimately undermines the possibility of true justice, leaving both parties locked in a cycle of hurt. Justice, when viewed through the lens of revenge, becomes transactional, a simple exchange of harm for harm. But when we move beyond revenge and focus on healing, we can transform justice into something more meaningful, an opportunity for growth, understanding, and reconciliation. It is in this shift from retribution to restoration that true justice is found.